Today we're talking about Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. It's probably exceptionally difficult to write a book summarizing the entirety of human history in just 400 pages. I would go so far as to say that it's literally impossible to do it without some degree of generalization, simplification, abstraction, or just straight up omission of certain important events and histories. But I think that's okay. If you're looking for a more detailed examination of any of the myriad topics discussed in this book, then you'd probably be better off just reading a different book about whatever topic it is that you're interested in. If you take Sapiens for what it is, a pretty surface level evaluation of the doings of the Homo sapiens species for the last 70,000 years, there probably aren't many better options than this. I personally picked it up because I was specifically interested in pre-civilization humanity. What were human beings getting up to before society, before agriculture, before science? It's a fascinating topic to me that's obviously rife with speculation, but I was curious about the modicum of information that we do have. To be honest, I thought a much larger percentage of Sapiens was going to be devoted to this topic, but really it only makes up the very beginning of the book. I guess I didn't know that it was intending to cover literally all of human history, including like up until now, basically. What it does have about that stuff, though, is incredibly interesting. It's probably the most interesting part of the book, honestly. I appreciate how he really gets into the evolutionary pressures that allowed humanity to evolve cognitively at such a dramatic rate, and into the creation of basic human structures like culture and religion and family. I thought the discussion of the other species of now extinct humans was super interesting as well, as was the speculation about their ultimate fates. This is an area of history that I think is actually well suited to broad and sweeping generalizations because we really don't know that much about it. With no written language, with no settlements, with very little archaeological evidence, there's not much to go on besides speculation. It's not lazy or bad, there's just literally no other option really. I think Yuval Harari's writing style is well suited to this sort of thing. A lot of Sapiens reads like an intro to anthropology textbook, and I think the book suffers for that a little bit later on, but in the beginning portion it works quite well. By the time we get to the agricultural revolution, the writing becomes noticeably more prescriptive instead of descriptive. And from this point on in the book, a lot of the takes, for lack of a better term, seem very much intrinsically tied to Mr. Harari's own personal feelings on things. I've seen a lot of people criticize this book for that, but I don't necessarily hate it. A lot of the stuff he talks about is still up for debate, so you kind of have to pick a side, I guess. The middle section of this book, which is devoted to the time from when agriculture was invented to the scientific revolution, is still very interesting. Yuval Harari is strongly of the opinion that the invention of agriculture drastically decreased the quality of life of most of the human beings who were alive at the time, and I think that's an interesting consideration. Humans did in fact evolve over the course of tens of thousands of years to be hunter-gatherer type apes, and I guess the invention of agriculture did alienate us away from some of our evolutionary desires, you could say. We created more work for ourselves and harder work for ourselves for essentially no quality of life improvement whatsoever. You can argue that our lives are better now with the advent of advanced civilization, but for an ancient farmer, their toiling existence was likely worse than that of their nomadic ancestors. I particularly enjoyed the chapter about the origin of written language. I'm a big linguistics guy, so it was kind of fun to see the origins of written language examined in that type of way. He talks about how with the invention of advanced settlements, there was too much administrative information for the human brain to hold, so the invention of writing was literally necessary to run any sort of successful empire. I love the detail about how the oldest artifacts that we have with writing on them are all like Sumerian tax info and record keeping. Once this book starts diving into the scientific revolution, probably around 1500 AD or so, is where it really loses a lot of steam for me. It's hard to articulate it in any other way than just to say that it gets kind of boring and tedious. I think one reason for that is once we're dealing with more modern societies and histories, the superficial nature of this whole book sort of becomes harder to ignore. He begins to analyze this symbiotic relationship between science and empire and capitalism, and while he has some interesting things to say at a cursory glance, it it's just that. It feels cursory. You can really feel the oversimplification and the distortion of things, and if there was ever a point that I found to be particularly interesting, it kind of just made me want to read a different book about whatever topic he was discussing. And based on what I just said, this might sound kind of counterintuitive, but a lot of this book is also really repetitive. Sometimes I'd feel like he would get the point of the chapter across in like the first paragraph and then spend 4 pages just monotonously reframing the exact same argument and the same points over and over again. I think I might have just preferred this book as a whole if it was more focused on the ancient side of humanity specifically, and he just expanded on that a little and then left it there. Another thing I wanted to note about this book is that it's kind of extremely pessimistic. It holds a very cynical, borderline nihilistic view of humanity, and although it does a decent job justifying that outlook, it still sort of rubbed me the wrong way a lot of the time. Obviously, humanity has quite a dark history with our destructive impact on the environment, our horrible treatment of animals, cruelty and violence among ourselves, and those things ought to be discussed in a book like this. I won't deny that. But at the same time, I feel as though this book fails to incorporate a lot of the things that make humanity good and worthwhile. Culture, art, altruism, cooperation, empathy, kindness, love, I don't know. Sapiens views humanity at a very distant, nearly clinical angle, which in some ways is necessary if you're going to condense the entirety of human history into one medium-length book. But I never felt the sense of humanity being the sprawling, vast, enigmatic, majestic tapestry that it is. Maybe that is an unfair expectation to levy, but I was sort of hoping that a book which is ostensibly trying to encapsulate the whole of humanity would have evoked something like that in me. So there's some good parts, some boring parts. I'm gonna give this book 6 monkeys out of 10.